Hey folks, Rob here, bringing another tutorial. This one's going to be Chapter G, and we're going to be looking at Section 12, Landing Craft. Now this is going to be a two-part video. This one's just going to go over some basics, and then the second one is going to go over combat and how they apply to landing craft. So let's get into this. Some basics about landing craft. Now there's basically 9 in the game. 7 US British ones, and there's 2 Japanese. So of course everything goes through iterations. You can see there the summary list that's available in Chapter H Notes for Landing Craft, which has all the information that you're going to worry about. We do have the DP damage points. Again, we're going to get into all of those, what they all mean, but things to look at would be armor factors, size, and or possession of any kind of gun in case they are able to defend themselves. Generally speaking, landing craft are treated as watercraft, however, and as boats, but they're not using assault boats or rafts. So it's used as some of the boating rules, but with some exceptions. They are considered vehicles generally, not AFV unless indicated otherwise. In some cases, because they have armor, they may constitute vehicle target type, but again, we'll get into the specifics as we get to that. If they ever suffer a recall like an AFE does, they only become stunned. So the most you're going to see is stunned. However, there are cumulative stun effects, and therefore the landing craft will never leave the play field. It will just be correspondingly penalized. The inherent crew always has morale of 8, and they must be crew exposed to operate the watercraft. So obviously everything that entails. Now stunned crew on a landing craft do not button up, and they cannot break. They're only eliminated if the landing craft is destroyed, and they cannot voluntarily abandon it. So if, however, the landing craft is wrecked and they survive their crew survival roll, then they'll take the form of a 126 as appropriate. When it comes to inexperienced crews, there's always a chance that you may have less experienced drivers of these landing craft, and you're going to get penalized by deducting 1 movement point. And the only thing else might apply would be when you do beaching during a heavy surf. You're going to be penalized with that as well when you have to make your roll. Lastly, for basics, if you're destroyed in deep ocean, then all the passengers are eliminated. Everything on the landing craft itself goes down to the bottom. If, however, you're in shallow ocean, which is usually the 3, maybe 4 hexes from the beach, then you will have a chance of surviving. But you're considered fast aground, and you're able to unload from the landing craft. Or if you're eliminated in shallow water, then you're considered to be aground. So the surviving passengers will be able to jump off ship, as it were, and that way they're not totally lost. When it comes to passengers, what we're talking about is these 7 types. Now that covers everything from boats, if you want to carry assault boats on there, to vehicles, support weapons, and personnel. Personnel are much like with chutes, have a morale of 8, and again are buttoned up, never CE, immune to mobilizing, and immune to task checks, pinning task checks, leader loss, etc., heat of battle, everything you see there. If they break, should they break in the process of taking fire, then they will be casualty reduced. When it comes to the contents of the landing craft, they're actually kept off board in the cloaking display chart, one of the chapter dividers. Again, just like cloaking or parachutes, they do not take counter form until they unload from the landing craft. So any results that happen are noted on the side record in the cloak and display box. Again, it's not until they're actually unloading from the landing craft that you see what's actually there. And lastly, for purposes of the seaborne assault, which is basically the only time you're going to use landing craft, you can only use them, they can only enter play if they have at least 2/3 of their capacity filled. So for your typical, in this case here, we have LCVP, we have 39 portage points. As long as I have 26 points or less, or more, then I can enter play with this one. So basically, you cannot have a bunch of landing craft with 1 squad and each try and spread out your eggs, as it were. You must always try and put at least 2/3 into the landing craft. Now, the exception, of course, is vehicles. Again, there's a variable portage point cost for a vehicle, and you'll see the chart there in a second. Landicraft always retains possession of any unpossessed equipment and wrecks. So if in the process of approaching the beach, say you get taken out and you lose infantry or a vehicle gets wrecked, the wreck and all that equipment will be staying on the Landicraft. All 5/8 vehicle counters are stacked top to bottom, and that represents their position in the Landicraft from the front to the rear. Now that's important, and it's called a vehicle stack because should one of those vehicles through random selection be destroyed or become a wreck, I should say, then all the vehicles stacked beneath it will be unable to exit the landing craft. So just bear that in mind. You want to have probably most useful vehicles towards the front and your less useful vehicles towards the rear on the off chance that that might happen to you. When it comes to infantry, and this includes guns as well as motorcycles, boats, and horses, they're all stacked the same. However, you can rearrange yourself in the middle of transit at any point. And this is called the infantry stack. So we have the two stacks, infantry and the vehicle, and usually they're kept separate on the cloaking display. Again, you don't see the contents until you actually unload from the landing craft. While you're aboard, the only thing you can do as a passenger is any morale checks or task checks as required. Unhooking guns or removing wrecks. It is possible to remove a wreck while it's on a landing craft using the wreck removal rules. And then finally, support weapon transfer and or recovery should one of your squads die, for example, somehow, and casualty reduced out of existence. They drop their weapons, somebody else could pick that up. But that's all you're allowed to do while you're on a landing craft. When it comes to movement, a landing craft, you have basically one hex per, one movement point per hex. So let's get rid of these for now. Just use this guy here. This landing craft here has a movement factor of 4, which means it spends 1 for every hex. So that would be 1, that would be 2, that would be 3, and so forth. Anytime you change your covered arc, costs you a point. And remember, should you have an inexperienced crew, that you're actually going to be deducting 1 from your overall move capability. You never count as overstacking, so you can have multiple landing craft in a hex. However, should you have a vehicle located in the hex, let's give them a vehicle, and say this is shallow ocean, we have a vehicle and we have a landing craft. Provided the vehicle is not loaded up on the landing craft, that constitutes overstacking. However, if the vehicle is on the landing craft, then it's not overstacked. And again, you can have multiple landing craft in one hex. All right, when it comes to stopping, you do not expend stop points as a landing craft unless you want to go in reverse motion. Say, for example, you're in front of this wire and tetrahedron, you want to go back for whatever reason. You have to make sure that you stop before you can move backwards, much like a vehicle. You're considered non-stopped unless you're beached or immobilized. So if you're beached here, obviously you're considered to be stopped. However, if you're approaching the beach, you're going to be considered non-stopped, even if you're not moving. And should you become immobilized in the process, again, depending on the damage type, then obviously you're not going to be able to move. You're going to be considered stopped in that case. All right, when it comes to being aground, fast aground, and mired, whenever you enter a shallow ocean, so in this case, we have 4 hexes between the deep ocean and the beach hex, which we have to traverse. This is called shallow ocean. Everything above this line is going to be called deep ocean. Remember, if this goes down in deep ocean, everything aboard it is lost. If this goes down in the shallow ocean, then it could become aground, or it could be just immobilized, a wreck. And anything aboard it has a chance of living and surviving. Now, as you leave the deep ocean and you enter the shallow, you must start taking BOC checks. And the only modifier that we have or we care about is the, let me turn off the immobilize, is this +2. Again, all these are the landing craft, all have some variable number, +1, +3, 4, what have you. This is the only modifier that you apply to the bog check when you are moving through shallow ocean. So in this case, we have a +2, we roll our dice, we rolled a 4 up to a 6, so we don't reach 12, which is what you need to bog down. Now, the only other modifier beside that obviously would be wire. If you have a whole bunch of obstacles across, for example, and you have to enter this location, besides the obvious risks for the tetrahedron, if you enter any wire, you would add a +1 to your bog as well. Should you fail your bog check, say we rolled 12 or more final, you become stuck where you are, and the only way to get back or to get out of this is to stop and reverse. So you say you spent 1 point to enter this location, you become aground because you failed your bog check, and now you want to get out. So you have to, depending if you have enough move, you have to spend a point to start. So this is going to be a die roll, and we're looking for a number. If it's less than 4, then you're freed. If it's if you're mired, say you rolled at 5, and you now have a mired, wait, that's bog. Right, you're mired, and you attempt to get off the sandbar that you're stuck on, then you would add a +1 to that as well. Again, you want to roll a 4 less, like we rolled, to become unstuck. And lastly, if you roll a 6 in your attempt to remove your aground status, then you become what's called fast aground, and you're both beached and you're immobilized, so you're unable to move any further from where you are. Now, reverse movement, it always costs double, just again like a vehicle, and you can end your movement phase in reverse motion. Again, you just put the applicable counter on to indicate the status of the... Last thing about reverse movement is you can end the movement phase in reverse motion, but you cannot voluntarily end the movement phase unless you've actually stopped. So if it's involuntary, for whatever reason, then you can stay in reverse motion, but typically you would have to stop. Now, last thing is when it comes to drift, typically if you're using rivers, you do have to worry about drifting. In the ocean, you don't have to worry about that except during heavy surf. Again, when it comes to inexperienced crews and drifting, you're going to be penalized a little bit more, but that's the only two things really for the inexperienced crews. All right, so when it comes to beaching and unbeaching, obviously you cannot do it over a cliff hex side or a bridge. It's got to be a clear beach and water hex junction. In this case, I would come straight ahead. All right, should for some reason your landing craft be destroyed out in the shallow ocean, you're still considered aground, so you're marked with the applicable counter. Even if you're a wreck, you're still grounded, and you're still able to unload the passengers from the vehicle, even if the crew and such are not lost. Now, it costs no movement points to actually beach. All you do is just you pay the one cost to enter the hex location, and you drop your ramp if you have a ramp. In this case, this one does not have one. Some of these, like this LCBP, does have a ramp which you can then drop to let off all your vehicles. Now, the only time you can beach during the advanced phase is if heavy surf is in effect. Again, we'll get into the specifics of the ocean when we get to that tutorial, which is going to be its own thing when we talk about beaches. Last thing we'll talk about is the unbeaching. Now, once you've deployed your contents onto the beach, you want to get your landing craft out of the way, maybe make room for the next one. You start up in reverse, and again, you pay double the cost. So in this case, we're going to start up in reverse, pay 2. We could pay 4, and then we're out of move, and then we're stuck in reverse motion. And then we have room for the next guy to come in, and he can disgorge his contents just as well. So let's talk about loading and unloading now. Normal vehicle loading rules apply. So again, you're always going to be limited to 4 movement points for your units. Even with the leader, you're only ever going to have maximum 4 because the leader cannot give you that bonus when you're going to enter any kind of conveyance. It's going to cost you 1/4 of your move to load and to unload. So assuming this landing craft was here and we were in this location here, let's orientate it properly, we would have to pay the 1/4 move to get on. So that would be 1, leaving us 3. And now, of course, the vehicle itself will also lose 1/4 of its move. So it's going to be rounded up. It's going to cost them 2 move, giving them 3 to back up if you want to reload. When it comes to unloading again, you just exit the vehicle, pay the normal cost in the direction of the landing craft's covered arc. So say, for example, we have minefield just opened up here. Let's put this one here. We realized we sent in 1 unit there, blew up a mine. These guys, now we want to move something else. Because our covered arc is facing down to the left, we will have to pay an increased cost to jump over the side. And all you can do is jump off the craft and end up in the hex. So that's jumping over the side, but you're stuck in the hex. It's only if you're inside the covered arc of the landing craft that you're able to advance forward. Should our conveyance be immobilized out here in the water, and we want to jump off it because of our situation, again, we could ramp down, but you're still going to cost you 50% of your moves, in this case 2, assuming you haven't spent any of the vehicle itself. You're going to cost you 50% of your movement factors to exit the landing. And the last thing we'll talk about is if we have, say, a vehicle in this conveyance as well, not that this one would fit it. We have too much right now, but assuming that we had capacity, you're not able to use any kind of assault movement, or I should say armored assault, or platoon movement, or assault moving. Continuing on with some loading and unloading, whenever you have an experienced landing craft crew, you're obviously going to have to pay the required 25% even of the reduced amount. And there's always the possibility of doing a minimum move depending on the cost. Again, if you're beached in water and you pay 50% more, you've moved, your wreck is on fire, or I should say the landing craft might be on fire, you have to get off it. You're still allowed to do a minimum move if you exceed the 100% of your movement points. If you have a landing craft like this one here, we compare the two. Notice that we have a line underneath the portage point capacity. This one does not. That means that it does have a ramp. So in this case, because this LCVP does have a ramp, it's not going to cost anything extra besides what we talked about to exit. However, because this LCV does not have a ramp, you're basically jumping over the sides. You're going to have to unload at double the cost. So again, this is where the minimum move comes in. When you run out of movement factors, you can still always move at least the 1 hex, jump off the side underneath the landing craft. Right, so let's look at vehicles. Remember, they always come off stacked in order. If we look at our passenger portage point cost, we compare the tonnage of the vehicle. Again, for that, you look at your Chapter H notes. We look at our vehicle listing here, and we look at this column here where it says weight, and you just add them up. So in this case, we have the M3 light tank, which is located here, and it weighs 12.5 tons. So because we can handle 12.5 would be a 45 portage point cost, that tells me that we can put in 330 portage points divided by 40, and that would be, quick math failing me, 7. 7 times 4 is 28. Yeah, we could put 7, maybe even 8 vehicles inside the one conveyance. Again, whatever order that they're stacked on, top to bottom, is the position front to back in the landing craft. So if we give ourselves, let's say, 4 tanks, and for whatever reason, this one's determined randomly to be destroyed, becomes a wreck, only the vehicles in front of it will be able to get off it until this wreck is removed. So just bear that in mind. Last thing about loading and unloading is you cannot have riders. You can unload and unload into a vehicle. So if we have, in this case, let's give ourselves a half track. We could have our squad loaded up on the half track, and that's about the only exception to the rule for riders. Continuing on then with loading and unloading, we have hooking up a gun, which of course is NA. Basically, once it's set up on the landing craft, you cannot change its position, especially if it would end up exceeding the landing craft's portage point capacity. When it comes to manhandling guns, boats, and motorcycles, you're allowed only if it's beached, so you can push them off the vehicle if it's the landing craft, if it's beached. And any non-burning wreck, as I just showed you there, will prevent anything beneath it from exiting the landing craft. When it comes to fires, there's always a chance something might catch on fire. And we have a blaze. Say we have even a burning wreck. We rolled really well in our damage result, and we got a burning wreck. You cannot board a landing craft that has a blaze on it, even if it's on a wreck. If is a burning wreck, you cannot remove it. So even if we have vehicles underneath it, this vehicle is basically stuck and it's going to get burned when this landing craft goes down. So you cannot remove burning wrecks. You can only remove a wreck that is not on fire. And again, if the landing craft is ablaze, even without the vehicle, units will not obviously be able to enter the landing craft. So that's a short, quick video on some basics of landing craft. And in the next video, we're going to be getting into the actual combat results from and versus landing craft and all that means in there. So we'll see you guys in that video. Bye-bye.